Live streaming is on.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the world. My name is Jerry Fielka. It's March 7, 2021. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Clinton Ignatoff, Duncan Echelson, and Bill Kuhns. I hope I got that right, Bill. It rhymes with prunes. Bill, tell me it again.
Kuhns.
Kuhns. I knew I'd get it wrong. Third time in a row. So with McLuhanMashups, we are merging McLuhan with the common person and not speaking in highbrow intellectual terminology, though that might leak in a little. So what are we merging today in this mashup? Well, let's turn to John Cage, who would say, that's a very good question. I wouldn't want to ruin it with an answer. So that's exactly what we're probing is questions. And for a brief intro, before we go round robin, I wanted to acknowledge celebrating Women's Month. And that's what a mashup starts with, right? M-A, mashup, ma. So the woman is the hidden ground behind all this. We're making and matching. That begins with ma, M-A. And that's the great cliche, women know and men suppose.
All of us began with ma.
Yeah, all of us began with ma. Very good. And so we are going to now consider this first question from me, and then we'll ask each one of you what question you bring to this party. My question is, how do you probe not knowing, since questions imply the need of an answer? So, you know, Cage said, that's a very good question. I wouldn't want to ruin it with an answer. But let's start with you, Duncan. How do you probe not knowing? We're trying to strive for not knowing, since questions imply the need for an answer.
Well, I start from the assumption that we are ignorant. And what we're attempting to do in our lives is gain a little bit of knowledge, although even the answers we get, we should consider as tentative at best.
That's good, Duncan. You know, be brief and carry on so we keep this circle flying. Bill, you're up. You want me to repeat the question or you got it?
No, I got it. I would, to paraphrase McLuhan, I would argue that there are no answers. There are only better questions. In one passage, he praises the Japanese for their ability to turn one question into many questions and invite hundreds of different kinds of answers. A kind of turn one question into a method of crowdsourcing. And I tend to think that's a very good approach to questions.
Dude, that was beautiful. I got a retort on that word you used, but we're going to go to Clinton, our master and leader. Thank you, Clinton, for knowing which buttons to push.
I'll take it.
You want me to repeat the question, or
Please.
You know what it is?
Please do.
How do you probe, or how do we probe not knowing, since questions imply the need for an answer?
I think it's useful to talk to as many other people about whatever it is on your mind, find out how much it is they know about it, and then try to find precisely the border where things start getting productive. So ignorance can be crowdsourced. Go find out where your own runs out, but also where you can meet others where their own runs out too. And it's all through conversation.
Yeah, that's Bill. You brought up a pretty academic term there, crowdsourcing, or maybe that's the common man's term. But Bill, you said there are no answers, only better questions. Isn't that a value judgment? I mean, Marshall was sort of trying to be Zen. He's probably like me. He was a hypocrite. but isn't better questions implying a value judgment?
It implies a qualitative judgment. I'm not sure about value.
Well, what's the difference between qualitative and value?
Depends who you're talking to.
So, Duncan, what question do you bring to our party?
Well, I want to make a comment first to Bill's comment about the Japanese, only because I did spend 3 years doing intensive group work with Japanese businessmen. And one of the things that was constantly obvious was when we would get a group of 5, generally my classes were 5 highly talented, highly educated Japanese trading company men. And we would pose them problems. And our hidden agenda was to help them realize that unlike them, that American businessmen in particular always liked to get to answers as soon as possible and did not like what was considered extraneous material. Whereas a typical group of talented Japanese businessmen, when faced with a question, will talk and talk and talk and talk and go off on what seemed like tangents and move round and round and bring up subjects all over the place. And that was because their group need was to arrive at consensus. And everyone basically would have to agree with the answer before the answer was stated directly. Unlike what I will call, I don't know, I haven't worked in American business in ever, but the image of American business is someone's idea will tend to dominate. And the quicker they dominate, the better it's considered, so business can move on. And we had to teach the Japanese businessmen that this is what they were going to be up against. Because if they went to America and were engaged in American business type stuff, and they brought up consensus building questions, probes, etc., they were going to be looked at as devious and vague and not understanding that things need to get done, blah, blah, blah. So that's a long-winded answer in response to what Bill
I
had
like
to
that.
say.
I like that. That's very useful. So consensus becomes not the answer, but the parameters for finding the answer.
Correct. And you have to indirectly address everybody's issues and have everybody feel that they're part of the answer. And they're not, unlike an American thing, they're not being run over by somebody else trying to dominate, but that they're part of a working group.
That's what we try to do here, but I'm going to blab my mouth in really quick. Hey, Bill, I'm glad you're laughing. This is a big joke. So, Duncan, that was brilliant. But let's flip it back for a second, Duncan, because you know we love tangents. Is consensus more innate or more invented by humans? The act of consensus, the need or this thing called consensus, more innate or more invented, Duncan?
That's a difficult question in this case.
Okay, we'll come back to you. We'll come back. Bill.
I think it depends on the context. Within post-alphabetic civilization, I think it tends to be more invented. Within tribal societies, I tend to think it's more innate.
Way to put it in context. Okay, let's go to our wizard on the hill, Clinton, for the tiebreaker. Sorry.
Yeah,
Clinton, what do you think?
you see, yeah, you can have a consensus. That doesn't mean you're necessarily correct. Everyone can have a wrong, can be, wrong. I don't know. Can, yeah, maybe consensus defines a tribe, like Bill says. Although if you all have a consensus and it happens to actually overlap or be a perception onto the objective reality of a situation, then I mean that's all the better. The former would probably be innate. The latter, probably an invention.
I like ladders. Okay, Duncan, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No
Do you want to?
no problem.
Yeah.
I basically agree with the idea that within tribal societies, there's a tendency for it to be innate. But the problem is, at least in my past studies of anthropology, that there are different types of tribes. And some tribes are run by a strong man. And although the strong man ultimately depends upon the other members of the tribe to get anything done, some tribes are organized as if he or she was making the decision. Other tribes are truly consensus building tribes. And they have long discussions and they appeal to tradition and they work with knowledge within the group. So that's what makes it hard to say whether it's innate or invented.
Yeah.
Is because even at the so-called primitive levels, there are distinctions.
I mean, you could ask the same question about language. Is language innate or invented? And since it was invented, it's been innate. And every human society, I believe, has invented language or come up with language. I think it's what distinguishes us from other forms of higher mammals.
So are you saying that cliches are innate and archetypes, or no, cliches are invented and archetypes are innate?
I think they're all invented. Once you've got language itself, everything that comes out of it is invented. But it's invented communally. It's invented by a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Archetypes, I don't know how many people it takes to invent an archetype, but it takes quite a few to invent a cliche, or for that matter, today's cliche, which are memes.
Yeah. That was good. You guys get it. Okay, let everybody bring a question to the party. Keep it brief. You're up first, Duncan, and we'll go round robin with Duncan's question, then with Bill's, and then with Clinton's.
What's the question?
that's Wait, are you being facetious? Or
No.
Well, that is your question. What is the question?
What's the question?
Okay, Bill, you're up.
Okay, can I give you a McLuhan question? My favorite McLuhan question from his 1960 report on understanding new media done for the National Association of Educational Broadcasters. He says if a book is the death of a tree, what is a TV program the death of?
Yeah. But we've got to go round robin with that, because when you taught me that one, Bill, I said, if the cell phone is if the book is the death of the tree, then you go, if TV is the death of, if the cell phone, you just run it down what is the internet the death of, is the death of what? So, I mean, how would you answer that? Do you want to just leave it as a question, Bill, or do you want to attempt to answer?
Well, you were asking for questions.
I know, but I'm implying we're supposed to go round robin to answer them, because we could go round robin with great questions all night. No, I love it. Duncan's was, what is the question? We got your question. Let's go to Clinton's. You were supposed to bring a question to the party. And what is it?
Oh, what my question is? I was going to answer
Yeah.
Duncan's question.
Okay, go ahead.
It's the first track on the Moody Blues album, A Question of Balance, which then follows up with the question, why is it we are here? On this ground we walk. Gets into the question of technology. I'm not being wholly facetious though, because it's in the dawn, I really place the Moody Blues and all my favorite prog rock artists and whatnot at the sort of dawn of culture, trying to ask all the important questions regarding the contemporary situation that we're in, and that album happens to be one of my absolute favorites there regarding. It's kind of interesting to think how since that album came out, again, Question of Balance by the Moody Blues, it's kind of more relevant than ever. It's also the first track you hear on the movie. It's the first mid 90s docudrama on the life of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and the best docudrama there regarding, based on the book Fire in the Valley, called Pirates of Silicon Valley. So somewhere I'd say the question is in the dawn of our contemporary constitutive media, microcomputers. Anyways, that's my string of associations with the question, what is the question?
No, I like that. I was going to say 30 years after this guy got beat up by LA cops, Rodney King, the Los Angeles police department used to have the motto "Serve and Protect," and then they revamped it, treat him like a king. So everybody knows Rodney King got beat up 30 years ago. It was captured on videotape, and it talk about causality. So then, once he healed a little, he said, "Can we all get along?" Which is a good question. Can humans get along? And my question is about revamping questions. Like, I would say, can we all probe along? Is it innate in humans to question, or is it innate in humans to doubt? Are we elitists saying, oh, well, we know good questions, or we can stand on the shoulders of giants and come up with good questions, but is questioning innate?
Only when there are problems.
Well, that's good, because Duchamp said there's no solution because there's no problem. So is there a time when there's no problem?
Yes. Both individually and culturally, yes. Gregory Bateson brought this to a head. He said, the consciousness is when there's a difference that makes a difference, when we have a problem. If we're content, we're not probing, or we may be probing for the fun of it.
Yeah.
I think of I've always thought of people who are content as getting eventually, stagnate or stir crazy, or just start tearing stuff up just to make something interesting happen.
Yeah. Well, what do you think, Bill? Are we just content?
I'm not sure contentment is that contenting. I think after a while you go a little stir crazy.
That joke about the kid who's given a pony for his birthday, mm-hmm. and his dad says it's in that room, and then the room is filled with shit, and he's going through the room. I'm probably saying it wrong. Do you know the joke, Duncan?
Mm-hmm.
You want to explain it?
As I remember, the joke is the child on Christmas Day is introduced to a room that's full of horse shit. And the child gets really excited and gets a shovel and starts digging. And they ask him, what's he so excited about? And he says, where there's horse shit, there's got to be a pony.
You could say that about the history of civilization as well, couldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
That human progress is a matter of digging through the horse shit of existence with the confidence that somewhere in there there's a pony.
Or I would even turn it the other way around, that they show you the pony and try to get you to ignore all the horse shit.
And then someone comes along and says this horse shit could be our fertilizer to grow some more ponies. You know, grow some plants to feed.
Right.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
Why? Yeah, I'll probe a funny question that's serious. In Venice, California, we have cops on horses.
Mhm.
Sometimes we've got 1 million people walking on our boardwalk per month, more than Disneyland. It is a tourist trap.
I remember that boardwalk.
It's a beautiful
That's
place.
quite a sight, that boardwalk.
Yeah.
The best place
Yeah.
for people
So you get
walking
homeless
in the Los Angeles area.
Totally. And you get rich people, poor people, you get all the mush. And when the cops on the horses come by, they shit on the boardwalk and they don't clean it up. And I'm like, dude, why don't you put a bucket by the horse like they do with the Philadelphia cops? So the horse shit is caught in the bucket and it doesn't land
It
where
hangs
people
right
are.
under the tail. And the
Yeah.
tail goes over the bucket. That's
Bucket.
how the Royal Canadian Mounted Police do it.
Right. And so I surveyed 10 horse cops over a period of time, and 8 of them just said, like, get away from me. No, we don't want to talk about it. A couple of them said, sounds like a good idea. And then, you know, are they responsible to clean up the horse poop where people are walking? Because the bottom line is, all it is grass. My wife was raised on a horse farm. She said horse poop is basically grass, but the visual of it is disturbing to have people walking through it.
It doesn't smell like grass, that's for sure.
Now, Duncan, you're closer to the horse culture. What do you think of that? Should they clean it up or not?
I think they should. You know, horse manure is great for growing roses. And I don't know, someone would have to work out the economics of it, but I mean, it seems like the guys and gals that go around collecting bottles and aluminum cans might be able to collect the horse shit and sell it to the rose gardeners.
Yeah. But you're agreeing someone should clean it up. It shouldn't just
right.
be flopped.
It is actually, I think it's a great symbol, or at least a minor symbol, of modern dysfunctional culture, where the police don't have to, nobody's thinking about that horse shit. Okay. And that's kind of the same thing with factories and pollution. It's the same thing with chemical pollution. It's the same thing with the byproducts of automobiles. We are thinking about that now. But if I could wax for a minute.
Please.
I've never been able to find this book, but when I was in Boston, I ran across a book which I think was called The God Man. And it was a novel, and there was some Englishman who went to India, and he had a guru, and the guru took him and put him in a spot and told him that he could have anything he wanted delivered to that area. He could just order it and people would bring it to him, but he couldn't throw anything away. And you could kind of see what happens, right? If you can bring stuff in, but you can't throw anything away. Like I have a garbage company comes and takes stuff from us. What if you or I or Bill or Clinton, we couldn't throw anything away. We couldn't have garbage. We had to figure out what to do with the byproducts of everything that we used.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if I can jump back, that's actually my question. I mean, we are about ready to completely do ourselves in, climate-wise. I mean, we're all pretending that we're not, that we've still got, decades to go. But it's actually much more serious than that. And it has to do with what do we do with the unwanted byproducts of the way we live our lives? That is the question.
We figure out a way to turn CO2 into an energy source.
Yeah. Okay. That would be one good thing.
I work at the beer store here in Ontario, which has won awards for being the most environmentally, I'm not going to get this precisely correct, but we recycle all of the packing materials that all of our products go out in. And we're the people who return the money to the people you were discussing earlier, collecting empty cans and empty bottles every day. I'm dealing with the pickers, as we call them, right? Wonderful, industrious people gathering all of the otherwise discarded and wasted aluminum and glass bottles and whatnot. So that's now, as for horseshit, I'm not sure. It might be a real hard sell to get anyone to go around and pick that up all day and show up to me as though I'm going to accept it over the counter and hand over a $5 for it. But that's neither here or there. The recycling economies do work. They are practical as part of one, and it does take sort of this sort of incentivization programs that do then give value to the process of material reclamation. I don't think some of the most needlessly wasted products on the planet are not glass bottles or aluminum cans. They're very
Plastic.
complex electronic devices that took massive industrial processes and the mining of rare earth minerals through near slave-like conditions across the world to come together to turn into a consumer object that then gets thrown away 6 months later because a TV commercial full of dancing people convinced you that your new phone was now an obsolete hunk of junk and you needed to get a new one. That's a large part of my particular concern with the waste, the contemporary electronics as consumable garbage. It's one of the most disgusting illusions perpetrated on people by advertisers and by companies. In particular, just understanding technology means you know how to get the most out of it and how to own it for a long time, much longer than the manufacturer would desire, is good for their bottom line.
Duncan, that book you mentioned, The God Ban, B-A-N?
I've tried to find that book. This was back in like 1972 that I read this book. And I have looked for it. I keep on thinking it's called The God Man.
Man?
But, I think so. This is the problem, Bill. I would like a copy of the book, and I've never been able to find another copy of it. So my information is probably not correct, other than I know what I read. And that was the major idea in the book, that this was the path to enlightenment, was the man having to live within this very limited area and could never throw anything away.
It's a brilliant concept.
Yeah, but it goes to Bill. Bill's question is, if the book is the death of the tree, what is the TV the death of? And then it flips to Clinton saying, what if the internet, you know, if the book is the death of the tree, what is the internet the death of? So, you know, it just gets updated. And the beauty of Duncan's was, it doesn't matter that that book is not found. It's that his memory kept the main lesson in his head, so he could tell us verbally. That we would love to get the book and read it again and see all the details. Mm-hmm. But the beauty was, but you were going to answer, Duncan, or respond. If the book is the death of the tree, TV is the death of what? Were you going to respond to that or something else?
I am going to respond to that.
Please.
Okay. So I was raised outside of the United States, and television was something I just encountered every once in a while. We did have Spanish television, but we didn't speak Spanish that well, so we didn't watch that much. So when I came to the University of Texas at the age of 17, I was adjusting to the new culture, and people would have these conversations about other people. And I began to realize that these people cannot know physically the same people because they're from all over the United States and Texas. And it took me about a month to realize that what they were talking about was television characters.
Oh.
That they would speak about as friends and acquaintances.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I taught at the University of Texas. Is this Austin?
Yeah.
I taught there in 1970.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Well, I've come in and out, but I'm still around the area.
So you're in Texas now?
That's right. Yeah.
I'm in Montreal. Clinton, I believe, is in Ottawa.
Still am, yep.
Okay.
It's good to see you're able to get outside, by the way, Duncan. It seems the weather's improved, eh?
Oh, yeah. No, that was a blip, a very costly and uncomfortable blip, but a blip. But anyway, the simple answer is the television distracted people from actual social life.
Yeah.
That in sociology, it's kind of a commonplace that when television came along, instead of neighbors gathering outside and communing with each other on a normal basis, everybody stayed inside their houses and watched the television programs.
So I guess this also informs your ideas about social construction as a whole then. I mean, personally, the idea that people's friends are, I'm not sure what TV show it would have been, the Fonz or Cartwright or whoever the heck was big on TV at the time.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people's ideas of what life should be like are actually, the Edmund Carpenter book, McLuhan's friend, Edmund Carpenter.
Yes, Over the Blow?
Yeah, the one where he talks about the fact that native peoples were learning, they were creating a faux history of themselves based upon like American ideas of what their culture was like, instead of having their original culture. They were getting kind of a faux culture developed, which then they started accepting as their culture.
And they started imitating characters from Hollywood shows. That sort of thing, or dressing
Kind of
like.
that sort of thing. Kind of that sort of thing. Yeah.
It was either they became what they beheld, or oh, what a blow the Phantom gave me.
They
Which
became what they beheld.
They became what they beheld, which is Blake basically saying, McLuhan, yeah, you become what you behold. But this is amazing through line, because Bill, you brought up a really good question. If a book is the death of the tree, then TV is the death of what? Duncan gave an idea that it was the death of, I would say, the live communal experience.
Social capital.
Well, you know,
one name.
Say it again, Bill.
Social capital is one name. It's Putnam's name for it.
Mm-hmm.
Social capital. It means the gathering of people in a live situation.
It means the richness of interpersonal relationships in society, and how strongly they define how people behave and how people feel full. Their lives are fulfilled and they feel accepted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would say that's exactly what TV with telephone is doing right now to me. I feel the richness of an interpersonal relationship with all three of you gentlemen immensely. And look at how far we are apart. But in essence, we're doing TV live broadcasting. So I'm not disputing what Duncan said. It was very important. And I'm glad Bill brought up the question. And I want Clint to answer, like, if the book is the death of the tree, then the internet is the death of what? Or just vamp on that question. But it reminds me of this bias I have that I just want to air for a second is, you know, I think sports are, a sports bar is on every corner in America, so the government can pull the wool over your eyes. So everybody is tuned to sports, and they go drink and talk about sports. And then you go, well, how's your team doing? And then some of us go, hey, I like to be active, but I don't want to talk about organized sports. You know, I don't need that in my life. And I'm not trying to make a value judgment when it's good or bad. And I just sort of said, well, it seems as though it's like a brainwashing device. Then you go into a bar where everybody's watching sports and all the guys are talking about politics. So it flips. And it's like, well, as though we're going to distract and brainwash all these suckers with sports. And, you know, when you get to it worldwide, then they do the soccer thing and everybody's soccer, you know, and then they're pulling the wool over their eyes in the back, you know. So sorry to go on the divert, but that's some observation I've made. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Duncan, you were going to say something. Oh,
if you're completed with your idea, I do have something I want to
talk
go
ahead.
About.
Yeah,
okay,
go ahead.
Okay, Jerry, what we are doing now is we are interacting. We are responding to each other. That is not what happened on television. Television is a passive thing. You sit there. I mean, the only choice you have is what channel to watch. And back when it originally started, you didn't even have that much of a choice. So, for example, in Austin, Texas, there was one television station the whole time that I was an undergraduate because Lady Bird Johnson owned that television station. And Lyndon made sure that Lady Bird was going to earn as much money as possible. And so he arranged for there to be no competition. Okay. In the beginning, my grandfather was an electronics guy, and he got one of the first televisions in his neighborhood. And actually, people would come over and watch the television together. But then the price of television and the novelty came down, and everybody got their own television stations, and people no longer gathered. They stayed home
Yeah.
and watched television.
But Duncan, that's my point. My point is that your that television caused the richness of interpersonal relationships because they gathered to watch it together. Then it morphed into more, we're individuals, and now it's me, my parents, and my brothers and sisters are in this room sharing that together. But it is a one-way thing. But telephone is two-way. And
Right.
so I'm just loving this term social capital, which Bill brought up, meaning the richness of interpersonal. I'm not trying to sell you guys on the idea of telephones, but that's basically what the New York World's Fair started in 39, kind of the same year Finnegan's Wake came out, is television telephones. And then we got it when 2001 came out, which Stanley Kubrick made, quote, to convolute Marshall McLuhan. So there's where we saw television telephones working. How cool. This works. It's in the movies. It must be true. But
the whole thing may be coming full circle, that what television has done to us for the last 70 years. There's a new service being provided by Bell, our TV provider in Montreal. And I forget what it's called, but it's a clever idea. It lets two people from different households share the same, like what we're doing right now. It would be two people on the side of a screen while they're watching the same TV input. And it's for them to dialogue and talk while the show is going on.
Oh, like watching a movie together?
Yeah, so you can watch a movie together without endangering anyone for COVID, is the idea.
But then they got you hooked on, that's like watching a movie with your partner at home. Now you just can pause it, talk.
Right,
I mean, we tried to watch a movie last night that's the best documentary, and after 10 minutes Susie goes, "Nope." I goes, "Okay, let's switch to this one." Okay. And then it was just like, well, no, normally you sit in the form 90 minutes, you sit for the movie, then you say if you like it or not. That's why back to 2001 Kubrick had McLuhan at the first pre-release screening and Marshall fell asleep after 10 minutes.
That should tell me after he left, his great line about what he said to his wife as they were leaving the theater. It's so nice to have the avant-garde behind you.
That's good. That's good.
Hey, Bill, you're the man. What's your source on that?
Actually, I've seen it in several places. Corinne told it to me in an interview in 1987. And I've seen it I think in both of the biographies, the biography by Marchand and the biography by Gordon.
Boy, you could drop the names good. But this is important because I think Eric told me that that's sort of bullshitty whether he really fell asleep after 10 minutes. He sort of fell asleep, but he stayed for the whole screening. Do you know that?
The person to ask on that one would be his daughter, Terry. She was the one who got very excited about going to that screening and sat right next to her father. And she would remember quite accurately just what happened.
Wait a minute. You're saying Terry, Corinne, and Marshall were all there?
Yeah.
And that's it? Nobody else?
Eric may have been there as well. And one of the other daughters may have been there. Or another two daughters may have been there. I have no idea.
Right,
it
because
depends who was at Fordham that year, living in the house that they rented.
But here's the important thing is that, Eric probably was there, and he sort of told me, and I can't remember. But the thing about Terry is, I saw Terry speak in Santa Monica with one of her books because she writes books on Indians, right?
Yeah.
And I saw her speak, and I raised my hand. And I said, what do you think of your dad as a Menippean satirist? And she goes, nobody knows about my dad. No one cares about my dad. Next question. And I was like sort of shocked that Terry would say that, because maybe she felt she wanted to be her own person and sell her own books. But it was just like, wow.
They grew up being upstaged by their old man.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
maybe you gave her an excuse to be a little satirical herself with the question as well.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm trying to remember if she was being Menippean or not.
Yeah, she was flipping the manipulation on me. But Clint, let's go. This was really fun, you guys. If the book is the death of the tree, then the net is the death of what?
Polling firms. I'm thinking, if you look back at the Mechanical Bride, what were computers first used for? And that was just gathering and correlating data on everyone and finding the norms, and then sort of honing everyone to fit into what he puts in Typhon in America as the one single wavy line of the absolute. Let's get everyone, all the conformists. Let's go edit the perfect movie and audience test all of our talking points, and try to create the one normative, inclusive culture that everyone, that is scientifically optimized, right? So doing all that gathering of statistics for the sake of marketing and propaganda and making predictable audiences. That seems to be what computers were first used for after wartime, when you didn't exactly have to go shoot down enemy airplanes anymore. So cybernetics moved into that. I mean, that's something Adam Curtis documentaries go into a lot as well, right? And so now with the internet, we can all sort of internalize the group sense, the sort of triangulate our position as who we are relative to the constellation of what used to be, the stars in the sky, the celebrities, the few people on TV, and the movie stars against whom we are taking our examples and using as role models. Well, now everyone's a star, a discarnate body performing on the world stage of the internet, and you can take your guidance from or steer your ship through whatever constellations you choose to form, and heaven knows what fringes and over what strange seas these skies are coming into fruition over. If I'm not getting too poetic anyway. But polling firms, yeah.
No, polling firms is good. That's like, well, we're on the Hollywood squares of the McLuhanMashup. So on to you, Bill. If the book is the death of the tree, what is the net? The net is the death of what?
Newspapers.
The internet is newspapers.
McLuhan said in 1957, if another source were to appear that provided the stock market numbers and sports scores and classified ads, newspapers would vanish. And he was not far from wrong on that one.
But I dumpster dive the New York Times every Saturday, all Sunday, costs $6 for a newspaper, and I can find a mint with no cat poop. And the newspapers are still alive and kicking. I know that they're sort of obsolete and they're sort of dying, but it is phenomenal. I even found a Financial Times the other day, that pink newspaper that is really well written. So it is amazing. So Duncan, how would you answer it? If the book is the death of the tree, the internet is the death of what?
Wow. I'm sorry, I'm a long-winded guy. Originally, after DARPA developed the internet, It was being used by scientists to communicate with each other, which is one reason why it was so open. And then it just, kind of techno hippies got involved in it and realized it could be used for bulletin boards and exchange information. And there was all this talk about information was going to be free and all that. And it kind of crescendoed with the Arab Spring, when the internet was going to free the Egyptians and the Tunisians and the Algerians. And then it turned around and went the opposite direction. It was like the internet gathered all those people together. Then other authoritarians with access to the internet took thousands of hours of video and they used it to squash it and squash those people and corral them. The Chinese are being amazing. So far in America, we've supposedly more or less left that up to the corporations. But this thing that was going to free us, and there are pockets of freedom. I consider this to be a pocket of freedom. But all around it, there's this force coming in. Whether the authoritarians are going to end up owning the whole show, I don't know. But it's certainly a real debate right now as to where things are going to be going in the next 10, 20 years.
That's
Sorry,
no, it's an excellent.
That was a good, brought up a lot of new questions, which I'll continue with. But just what would you summarize it into 2 or 3 words? The internet is the death of, what would you say, Duncan, in a few words, just 3 to 5 words?
The 1950s.
Yeah, look at that. 1950s newspapers and polling firms. You guys are amazing. So the other thing that Duncan, you evoked was a question I learned from a film called Problema. So we'll start with Clinton. What if all Chinese people want a car? That's the question. How do you respond?
People want lots of things. Are there enough? See, it's funny. Are there cities built for cars? For everyone to have a car? America went out of their way for the cities to be built to make everyone need a car to get anywhere. They built cities so that everyone would want a car. Why are Chinese cities built that way? Do people who live in a place full of bicycle paths and all the amenities of home, a 10-minute walk circumference, clamoring for a car, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hold on, because this is he started answering a question with a question. You win. That's what this is all about. We're trying to invent new questions, and that's McLuhan's influence of the wake. Breaking the code. Marshall's favorite book was The Code Breakers, and now the biggest, hottest book in the world is The Code Breaker. No S. Check it out. Check out the parallel of the two. It's amazing. But this is a question will go round robin, but it is the Irish, where Marshall got a lot of his stuff from Finnegan's Wake, would answer a question with the question. Guy goes, why do you Irish people answer questions with questions? And the Irishman goes, we do, eh? So, Bill, you're up. What if all Chinese people want a car? What would you say,
I would
Bill?
say Elon Musk needs to build factories in China.
Very good. Okay, Duncan, What if all Chinese people want a car?
If they come anywhere close to many of them having cars, we can kiss our asses goodbye.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I mean, it's, you know, we really are on the brink of really serious stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, we can deny climate change all we want, but it's happening. And it's going to make, when it really gets going, it's going to make this pandemic look like child's play. I mean, we're there. And
Yeah.
if 100 million, there's like a billion Chinese. If 100 million or 150 million Chinese got cars, unless there was some new technology, even far beyond Tesla, that we're not aware of, that's going to push the stakes up even higher.
Right.
So,
but Clint,
that being said, I do want to respond to Bill's to the thing about are there cities made for it? I spent a long time in Japan. People with cars don't care whether their cities are made for it or not. They're going to drive anyway.
Yeah.
Many places when I walk in Japan, I've got cars passing that far from me.
Yeah. But
they will make cars to fit their streets.
Yeah. But I would say the hidden question, because we're after the hidden psychic effects of questions in this mashup, not just the surface literal question, is what if all Chinese people want a car? We're from the West. Are we to go, you guys shouldn't do this because you're going to ruin the world, or we know better, don't do this, but we did it, so it's like, how is this question, carrying the baggage of other things? So it's, it's a trick question in a way.
One part of the question, though, it sort of implies the idea of a free market demand, as though if they all want cars, the businesses and the governments are then going to go about making that money. And yet sort of the gist of my point about computers, for instance, is that it's the advertisements that create the demand. It's people only want what they're, to talk in extreme terms, people only want what they're told they should want. I mean, Rene Girard's mimetic desire writ large through television advertisements. And
I don't
so
I don't consider that extreme, Clinton. I think you're exactly right.
So if we were to go back, Duncan, to your paraphrase of computer history at the Electronic Frontier Foundation and John Barlow's manifesto of the internet wants to be free, it's like 1992, something like this.
Right.
This is all the public narrative, which sort of centralizes California as the hub of the story of our digital world, where, it was Stuart Brand going from the Whole Earth catalog through to, the digital age, right? And then Stuart Brand pops into MIT, the Media Lab, in the mid-1980s.
From counterculture to cyberculture.
Yes.
Very good.
Smooth transition.
Was this ever the counterculture, though? My counterculture is Richard Stallman, free software, source code for everyone, own your own computer, don't let this corporation steal your control over your private device from you, right? And that story is always covered up in favor of corporations selling us all, open source software, right? The idea that we need a job, that the industry is built on people telling us to continually buy services. You don't buy Photoshop anymore. Maybe if you gentlemen know, Photoshop isn't for sale as a product. It's a service you pay monthly for, like you're paying
from products to services.
Gas bill. You pay for Photoshop now month by month by month by month. You can't own it. That's where everything is going, and it's only that way because no one owns their computer, and people are tricked into right. And then the economy is built on the market not knowing that it could just buy something once and own it and keep it for 20 years if it wanted to.
Hold on, Clinton. Bill, what did you say? From what to services?
McLuhan's one of his favorite aphorisms is we're in the process of switching our whole economy from product-based commodities to services.
Right. Very crucial.
Yeah.
That's part of the electronic transformation.
Yeah. Really good, Bill. In Clinton, what you said was evoked by Duncan earlier. Do you know what NSA stands for? Never say anything. But you
No
guys, huh?
No such agency.
No such agency. But you guys know such agency. That's good. But you guys are really getting down to the bare bone question. Create the disease and offer the cure. So why do humans have to invent at all? Because isn't the invention the thing that unites us? Technology is the most human thing, is what I've learned from studying McLuhan. But everybody says, well, technologies have services and disservices. And if you create a car, it's got a lot of services, but then it's going to have a lot of disservices. So no matter what we create, it's going to have services and disservices. And our job is to cope with what we don't like. But we'll start with you, Bill. Why do we have to invent anything?
I think once we invented language, the Pandora's box was wide open. And we went on inventing and inventing and inventing, and we can't stop. It seems to be the curse of the human imagination that it needs to outer its own inner needs into peripheral devices.
But that's what happened, Bill. But why do we need to invent anything? The very first.
Well, if you invent a song or a poem, that's one thing. But to invent a computer is a slightly different thing.
And think about the nature of invention in the material world of media, and think about the nature of invention when there are no resources being spent in the content, the infinite content of a computer. If I want to paint a painting and I go buy some oil paints and I set up my easel and then I get one or two paintings out of it, and now I need to go buy more paint and another canvas. But a digital artist, having invested in the equipment, can now paint forever, limitlessly, can pump out 5 paintings a day, every day, forever. There's no cost past having spent the initial, again, unless you are, a slave to Photoshop and now continue to contribute to the economy by paying your bills, right? But that's not necessary. Content, and when you're working in the rearview mirror, in the content of a medium, when your materials of invention are the rearranging of pre-existing matter in new configurations of form, but you're not actually using up a material resource, invention's so easy it can just go on forever, and it's so cheap it can go on for forever.
But again, Clint, why the initial spark? Why does a human have to invent anything in the very first? Why? What is that?
Because it's gives you a feeling of security to have been proactive in dealing with a problem. There's not invented.
That's pretty dang good. Wait, stop there. That was good. That was really good. So you answered the question. It gives you a feeling because you think, the big thing of the world is, I want to make the world a better place. That is such a great aspiration. Everybody wants to make the world a better place. Now, just hold it there for a second because I want to go to Duncan. Duncan, just the bottom line. Why did we have to invent at all in the first place? Why did humans ever have to start inventing at all?
Well, I think that humans started inventing because they had some kind of problem they wanted to solve.
Yeah.
There was some sort of irritation that they wanted to get rid of. And on that level, I think invention is just fine. And on the level of inventing things because they're artistic or they're pleasing, that's fine also. Our current problem is we're inventing things to sell to other people. And we will invent something and then we will perhaps consciously or unconsciously lie like hell about it to convince people that they need whatever it is we're selling. And that's where we're getting into real trouble. Trouble that's poisoning us, that is setting up future catastrophe. So that's it.
Yeah, no, that was good. Now back to you, Bill. Did you tell us that language was invented to lie? Did you say something like that at one of our
I
previous?
always wanted to ask a good anthropologist that question. What's the role of lying in the creation of language, in the original invention of language?
Right, because it's interesting. You sort of said, why do humans have to invent? Because we got language. So, once we had language, then we could say, which Clinton and Duncan sort of said, there's a problem. Before we had language, were there any problems? They might have just said, this is life. We're not going to say this is good or bad that's happening. We just deal with it. Oh my God, a tsunami is going to kill me. Well, then that's it.
I think of one of my favorite films, which is Quest for Fire, where the problem is their fire went out and they needed to go find somebody else's fire to start a fire. And in the process of that odyssey, that journey, they run across a group of people who have found a way to create fire. And this discovery is the most awesome moment in that film or almost any other film I've ever seen. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's that voila, you can make fire. You don't have to steal it. It's there. All you have to do is take a flint and a stone and keep making the spark and feeding a little dry grass to it, and voila, you have fire. This discovery of invention itself was one of the most remarkable moments probably in the history of the human species. So
really good. What you evoked in me was I've asked this question for 30 years. What's the first human invention? And I go round robin with all these people. And one of my favorite answers ever was lying. And I was like, what? And then, my friend says the human gaze, the human sustained gaze. And then they say the line, or they say the first word ever was you. And, it goes on and on. The theater was the first human invention. But often the cliche answer is, what's the first human invention? Fire. I goes, we didn't invent fire. Fire was on the earth, whether humans are there or not. We invented the harnessing of fire. But, you've sort of helped me rethink it. It's like what did we invent? How to start a fire.
because presumably the first discovery of fire was caused by something like a lightning bolt. And somebody discovered that if you could take a little bit of that fire that rages through a field or a forest, and you could put it into a pile of logs or old dead wood, you'd get your own controlled fire. Presumably, something like that, way back when, 60, 80,000 years ago. But that must have preceded language, or a time of proto-language, where grunts and signals of various kinds became people's way of trying to communicate.
So I wonder if there's a flip there. So the ability to create fire is the invention here, and it immensely empowers. It gives a sense of empowerment and control over what was once a helpless situation of needing to have to, keep alive this force which was never under your control, right? Could go out on you, right? So, but now, do people invent needlessly to get that sense of control, as opposed to being helpless and needing, and actually, needing control as a sense of survival? It's like invention mindlessly as a cargo cult sort of process of feeling for a little while that you did something.
How many startup companies are there in Ottawa, do you think, Clinton?
We've got our own local. We've got a pretty big tech scene here in Ottawa. There are startups. There's a whole publication, a technology business journal of Ottawa that just covers this stuff every month. You can pick up at newsstands and whatnot. A lot.
I remember back in the 1980s, I sat in Clinton's chair. I did a little radio show interviewing people with startups and various tech scene people called Chip Chat.
Oh,
Chip
cool.
chat.
And it was quite amazing how much was going on.
I understand the local cable company here in the 80s had been innovating this sort of information service over the local cable lines, and people were buying their home boxes to sort of get their own little local Ottawa internet scene, one of the most advanced television information fusion services in North America.
Yeah, they were trying to bring the two together. Netflix wound up doing it, but everybody saw it coming.
Yeah.
Nobody figured out how to take advantage of it the way Netflix has.
Well, that alludes to this question then, about the 2008 financial crises. Was it more caused by human greed or more caused by information speed up? We'll start with you, Bill.
I think it was caused by a conflation of the two, because the greed pumped a lot of churn into a system that was already going too fast and was accelerated by robotic trading. Not that I know this stuff very well, but I would imagine that's probably it was both factors at once. So nobody saw just how fragile the system was with these two factors operating in tandem with one another.
How about you, Duncan?
Certainly, greed was a very important part of it. Also, magical thinking was a very important part. And also was a misunderstanding of how mathematics and risk, the mathematics of risk, actually work. If you haven't read it, and I imagine most of you have read it, certainly Nassim Taleb's book, Black Swan, is one. He makes great fun of these people. And also I would recommend Michael Lewis's, the movie based on Michael Lewis's book, The Big Short.
Yeah.
I was involved with a business group here in Austin, Texas that included a mortgage broker, a banker, and a high dollar real estate person. And weekly I would hear them beating the drums. And I was going to acupuncture. I just finished acupuncture and herb school at the time. And there was a 25-year-old kid who was in my class. And he and his wife bought a house. And I thought, something's very wrong here. There should not be anybody loaning these kids money to buy a house at this time. And then I started going and looking at the naysayers, of which there were a few. This is back in 2005, 2006, 2007. And so for about 3 years, I knew there was going to be a gigantic train wreck and a lot of people were going to get hurt. But of course, everybody was so excited about either buying a lot of house or making a shitload of money off of selling houses to people that had no business buying houses, or at least no business buying houses worth 3 times what they could possibly pay for it. So it's the technology, there's a financial instrument development. They brought in a lot of physicists, the quants, to run all these fancy programs to prove to everybody that they could split it up and there was no risk and all this stuff. So, all right, long-winded answer again.
Don't worry, that was beautiful. And Clinton, more information speed up or more greed?
Ultimately, we can finger information speed up, I think, in the long run, for the fact that so many facets of our civilization can sort of exist in this mutual consensus dream space of, well, for instance, the stock market or housing prices or anything else, depend largely on people's estimate of the value or the long-term, the value. It's all in their heads. If the market has faith in a product, then they'll buy into it, and that gives it value. And as long as everyone thinks everything's fine, then everything's fine. And then as soon as people start to panic, and there's a run on the bank, it's literally everyone's consensus construction belief of what is true that falls apart. Right? Like you said, it's magical thinking is exactly the term, Duncan. See, this is where the pejorative usage of social construction comes in from critics. The term "so many things are a social construction" boils down to it in its most cynical term. If we all act like this is true, oh, the economy's going great, isn't it? Yeah, it sure is going great, right? And then if science and studies and this analysis of quants and whatnot are all just used as these rhetorical bolsters to a shared collective dream that everyone makes true through embodying it and performing it every day, yeah, that's all electric speed up. And of course, the greedy elements are those who are aware of this, and yet continue to keep the dream alive, so to speak. When it's all you're doing is kicking the can down the road, or keeping the music going in the game of hot potato or musical chairs, right? It's literally Ponzi scheme dynamics, right? So,
right. Well, there is a
really good. So. Go ahead, Doug.
The critics are kind of held hostage.
Mm.
I mean, I've been in this position a number of times, and what I've learned is if you know something's going to happen and you start telling everybody early, they just think you're a fucking nut or a naysayer or a nihilist.
Yeah,
and you make less money that way.
Yeah, there's some part of them that knows that you're going to ruin what's working for them, right? And
they literally believe in the magical thinking. And anybody who doubts it, you're just a party pooper. And there's no real percentage in announcing the catastrophe early.
Really good. Gentlemen, we probably should kind of wrap it up, but I would be more than willing to go longer. But let's go back to Bill for a second, because what these two guys were just talking about reminded me of McLuhan saying, I didn't start the fire, I just turned on the alarm. And so, you know, I loved in the Wikipedia entry on Marshall, at some point they go, he's a light technological determinist. They didn't say he was blending technological determinism with Menippean satire. They just want to say, oh, he's a technological determinist. And then, you know, I started learning, like studying with Duncan and Clinton, that there's a lot more of determinism movements. There's biological determinism and historical determinism, and it's all boils down to causality. So where does emotions and feelings come into this world of calling Marshall a technological determinist? Bill, you know, how do you navigate that, you know, feelings and emotions, intuition, percept, with what's called technological determinism, which seems to be concept?
Boy, there's a whole snake's nest of questions in that question.
I know, just go for whatever.
They're all twisting in and out of each other.
Go for whatever. It's the snake eating itself. Go for whatever makes you feel happy.
Okay, I don't think of Marshall as a technological determinist. I think he was trying to walk a fine line between technological determinism and humanism. I think his basic instinct and his basic desire was to keep the humanist flame burning under the onslaught of new media. And I think he saw coming what we're living with today. For example, an internet that's causing more tribal friction than social harmony. He was very aware of these problems. At one point, he said that it was our basic frailty and our failure to understand these media that would cause new media to cause us to become more in conflict with one another. So he was aware of these problems, but the technological determinist doesn't really fit him, because he was constantly saying, no, once you understand these forces, you can work against them, you can undermine them, you can figure out how to survive them. And the surviving of technology is a very important theme, and particularly in his later work that I've discovered.
Yeah. But what you just said was so well put, Bill. But what can we do about it?
I say what we do is we teach every generation that comes along the finer arts of media literacy, and the largest part of media literacy is book literacy. So they know how to read books, they know how to spend time separating themselves from the information deluge, and slow down and breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw a movie last night called Captain Fantastic, and Viggo Mortensen raises these 6 kids, like hippie tribal kids in the woods, and they all read books, and they're Chomsky freaks, and it's amazing what they say, but it's like they're reading books. And I'm like, so same question to you, Duncan. What Bill just laid out in the technological determinism question, what can we do about it?
We can live differently, for one thing. So, you know, I told you before that my fantasy image of myself is that I've been spending my life creating answers to questions that nobody's asking yet. And the other part that I've tried to do is find satisfaction in my life without chasing after stuff and the latest fads, etc. And trying as best I can to be an example that life does not have to be a frenetic search. It can be a slow, open-eyed look around that tries to figure out, okay, is there anybody in my immediate horizon that needs some help? Do I really have any problems that I need to solve right now? Or can I just sit down and read another book? Or go have another cup of coffee and a conversation? So
Do another Zoom. You guys,
Or do
you didn't
another Zoom.
notice. Yeah,
but,
go ahead, Duncan. Sorry.
Basically to enjoy life and share it with people. Says my microphone is noisy. Am I coming across too shrill?
Yes, you came across really
Good
well.
stuff.
In the most cosmic thing that happened to the side of Bill was a sunlight reflection when he started 90 minutes ago, like as a little box, and it slowly moved, and now it's on Duncan's shoulder. See that sunlight box? How did that happen? You guys are miracle makers.
Hey,
that's
Bill and I have been working on this for a long time.
that's like again, Clinton, in we always end McLuhan mashups with the great quote by Marshall: communication of the new is a miracle, but it's not impossible. And the priest is trying to cross the Canadian border pre-COVID and he's got a flask, and the custom officer says, "Excuse me, Father, what's in that flask?" And he goes, "Water." And the custom officer grabs it. He takes a swig and he goes, "That's whiskey." And the priest goes, "It's a miracle." I learned that one from Marshall. So that's a miracle that sun, the same box of sun, went up there. Okay, Clinton, you heard what the question is. What can we do about it?
I think I take what the problem was and the solution from McLuhan. And the problem is that technological determinism happens when apes of God ape like God over someone. We all understand you can manipulate a child. You could lie to them and make them believe in something that's not true and drag them along. They could spend months believing something silly until it blew up in their face. And that's protracted into adulthood, protracted into cradle to grave. That's the sort of issue that young Marshall McLuhan was getting angsty over. And that's resulted in his first book, The Mechanical Bride. And he didn't like the tone he took in that book. He sort of wrote it off for the rest of his career. And that's because the solution he found was to sort of retell history, not in an Orwellian sense where you're enacting control over people, but tell the history in a way which empowers people to escape the forces of determinism. That shows them, tell history in a way which makes their immediate present world more empowering. Lets them see them for what it really is. Lets them see what in the past you're talking about is retrieved and powerful and alive today for you to use, and what's gone, right? Retell the history of all of our extensions of ourselves, which in a way which makes us the humans who are in control of them, and not the humans being puppeted by them, right? Understand what your world is made of, and that lets you defeat the forces that would otherwise be determining you by stealing your agency.
Wow, well put. And you use the metaphor apes of God, which is the title of a Wyndham Lewis book. Explain that metaphor. It went over my head.
As I understand it, because I haven't gotten there yet, the book is making fun of the poets of the time that Lewis had a particular disdain for, who I can better explain it in Eric Vogelin's language. The Gnostic is someone who makes soteriological speculations in cosmological terms, which is a whole bunch of $1 million words to say that people are trying to look at the material world of here and now, but use it for religious salvation, trying to save themselves, right? And whenever you're looking to to save yourself in a spiritual sense through the material world today, some ape of God is going to come along, like a guru figure or a cult leader or a strong man, and offer the equivalent to save your soul. Or you see it with simulation theory today, a glitch in the matrix. My review of that film is now live as of today on newexplorations.com. If I can now plug my website. Newexplorations.com. People looking to computers to save themselves for immortality. I'm just going to download myself into a computer and live forever, right? People are looking to save themselves from technology, and that's not how it works. That's just damning.
Yeah, really well put. In either Duncan or I'm not sure if Bill's seen it, but the new Adam Curtis film starts with the quote by either of you guys can say it, by David Graeber. And it basically says what Duncan says. Graeber, sorry, that we can live differently. That we make what happens, but we can make it differently. So I felt all three of you really nailed it. If any of you have any closing words, like anything else you want to bring up in the world of questioning, I just want to go round robin with one more real stupid one, but there's 5 W questions: who, what, when, why, or where. We'll start with you, Bill. Which one is your favorite?
What's that?
So event's a new one. Thank you. Duncan, which one is your favorite?
How?
Whoa, you guys are reinventing the question. Okay, Clinton, stay focused. These other smartassy guys. Who, what, when, why, or where? Which one's your favorite?
Where?
Oh my God, that was great, because majority of people say why. And one friend of mine I really look up to, we've had on here, Thomas Nordig, says when. So you guys are all here, present, be here now. Your presence has been enlightening today. Any final statements, questions? We'll go round robin. Bill, you can plug your book too, because you sent out a whole chapter to us on Marshall's favorite questions. So
that was from a book of quotations I'm compiling from his entire output over his lifetime. It's called the McLuhan Marshalling Machine, a dictionary of quotations. And it's still very much a work in progress. But anyway, Clinton, I want to get to you and talk to you about that at some point.
You got it.
Yeah,
I understand you're going to be helping us with the foundation, Clinton. Is that right?
Yep, I've got another meeting with David this week coming up. Yeah, there's lots of
Lovely.
exciting things in the world of McLuhanalia coming down the pipe.
Yeah. Okay, I look forward to that, working with you there.
Me too.
Okay, so a final remark on questions. I think the great question has yet to be asked rather than answered.
that is good. Well, I usually say that what question remains unresolved for you? That was good, Bill. We haven't even worded that question yet, is what you're saying?
We haven't begun to think it.
To think it.
Maybe our language is still a proto-language that will evolve into something much more multimedia and much more complex. And it will take that kind of a language for us to articulate that great question.
Maybe it'll involve TikTok dances.
I hope so. Okay, Duncan, any closing comments?
Actually, I want to take this opportunity to ask Bill and Clinton. I've talked with you about this before, Jerry. Mechanical Bride. I'm a kind of an Old Testament sort of guy in some ways, and I think that McLuhan was more an Old Testament fellow in Mechanical Bride than any of his other works. And my question is, did he decide that that sort of bluntness that he used in The Mechanical Bride was not the way to go for his career and for explaining to people what he was trying to say?
Yeah.
In other words, my impression is that he in some ways started obscuring and softening some of the messages in The Mechanical Bride to make them more palatable and perhaps understandable.
In The Mechanical Bride, he was already going softer on the subjects of his criticism. The somnambulists, the sleepwalkers, the roboticized people, who make up most of civilization. From what he was doing in his earlier drafts. In his earlier drafts, he was ruthless.
Oh, you've read the earlier stuff.
Yeah, I've read Typhon in America. He's absolutely scathing in
Especially the Dagwood stuff, huh?
The Dagwood stuff. Oh yeah, Dagwood, the simpering cuckold. It's just absolutely brutal, right? I think he realized he sort of struck upon a technique with his media theories and also his sudden late understanding of a lot of weird esoteric stuff that he suddenly thought the artists were using, that he could use the. In Mechanical Bride, McLuhan was very eloquent, and he could craft fine sentences, but he wasn't doing James Joyce modern poetry magic that he tried to do and tried to finesse in all of his later books. He went into magic for the sake of doing, the work of God in his most Catholic sense of trying to, wake people up in a sort of sense. And he had to go soft on them for that and ditch the whole moral value judgment thing.
Mm-hmm.
He kept the Menippean satire of Mechanical Bride, but he dropped the moralizing, is my way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
As a strategy?
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
He was still a closet moralist. He was still an extremely conservative man who was hostile to all the developments he wrote and spoke about. But he didn't let it show. He tried to maintain a distance from his own discourse. He called it probes. He said, "I don't believe anything I say." Things like that.
Uh-huh. Okay. So my basic intuition is holds up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it was a great question, Duncan. I want to follow up because both Bill and Clinton could elaborate. He called Mechanical Bride a new type of science fiction where the ads are characters in a letter to his mom. So how does that suss out with what you two just explained in Duncan's question?
What he hadn't yet done in Mechanical Bride was himself become a character. He became the famous McLuhan is an entirely whole cloth fictional character that could only exist on a television screen or behind a podium or in a classroom. He became one of the characters in Mechanical Bride after the fact. A walking advertisement for detached, rational, human scale observation. Kind of a Major Tom figure off the ground.
Ziggy Stardust.
How would you answer that, Bill? Why did Marshall say Mechanical Bride was a new type of science fiction with the ads as characters?
I think he was just poking a needle into his mother's behind. I don't think he meant much by it. He was being as annoying as he could with her.
Now
There's a lot of that in his letters to her. He
Now,
really
he would
loved
bad
her,
note.
and he was very, very good to her.
Mm.
But he did needle her a bit.
He would
Bill,
badmouth
okay.
science fiction, though.
Yeah.
I mean, he would make fun of all these stupid scientists who read Jules Verne novels all day and ridiculous stories about people going into space, because it blew you out of scale with the here and now. To go and try and blow your mind on this Carl Sagan level of science fiction was ripped your imagination from its important job of perceptual making sense of what's going on in front of your face, right? So
He blasted NASA for a space flight. He said they should be using anti-gravity instead. But he never figured out how that works or indicated that anybody had figured it out yet. But he needled us all.
We need Marshall's needling. We need the needling. But I often tell people. I even told David Byrne of Talking Heads once, because he's a McLuhan freak supposedly. I says, "Have you read the introduction to Mechanical Bride?" He goes, "I don't think I have." I goes, "That's the best thing you can read, is just where he says, hey, if advertisers work, why don't we use their techniques?" And then he talks about Poe's Descent into the Maelstrom. And I mean, to me, that is an amazing start of your book, your career. But Bill, bottom line, do you think Marshall, because he gets chalked off as a charlatan, would you call Marshall a smartass?
Oh, sometimes, yes, absolutely. And a bullshitter.
All right.
Okay, so anybody else, you have any comments? We can just say goodbye and thank you, and I love you all.
Good one, a very good one, Jerry. Thank you.
Thank Clinton.
This.
Thanks for putting this together, Jerry.
You gentlemen.
Thank
Jerry,
you.
you know the name of the book before Mechanical Bride that they referred to?
I didn't. I learned new. Tell it again. What is it?
Typhon in America, or
Typhon
God
was
Chaos.
the most horrible of all the Greek gods' monsters.
How does one access this?
You come to Ottawa and you get permission to go to the archives. Although I hope
I
we
have
can change that real
chunks
soon.
of the manuscript, Duncan. I could send them to you.
That would be lovely. I would really appreciate that.
We're lucky that Duncan is one of those people who actually reads, not me. Like, I was raised in front of a TV. I'm like Ken Nordine's comedy skit. I'm a vidiot. That's why I run a reading club. Yeah. For what book? Finnegan's Wake. Well, it's an unreadable book.
I'll mention one other thing. We kind of accidentally got this, I believe it's a Lebanese movie called What Do We Do Now? About a small village in Lebanon that is a mixture of Christians and Muslims. And some young guys get a television and they figure out how to get a television signal. And the results of the villagers being exposed to that television are not good, because they start hearing about conflicts between Muslims and Christians in other parts of the country. And they immediately the guys start fighting amongst each other. And the women immediately get together to try to figure out how to prevent this growing catastrophe. It's quite an interesting movie.
I'll look for it.
Great recommendation. So in closing, gentlemen, I've been honored and enlightened, and I thank you. And I'm going to end with two little things. One question that this is a question that Marshall asked that I think is an amazing question that I've had long workshops with many people on. How about technologies as the collective unconscious and art as the collective unconsciousness? So I just leave it. I'm not asking for an answer, but I just love people to think about that. and always think about. Go ahead, Bill. You're going to say
Where
something.
does he say that? Do you know where it comes from?
Boy, you get your detective on it. It is. I'm pretty sure that's a valid one, and we don't go into the deep fake world. Or I try my darndest not to misquote, but I got a good education, but I do know how to mispronunciate well. So and misquote well. So here's the final thought before Clinton hits the button. And my friend, we did a session with a day or two ago called Simon Prentice, said, do you know the anagram for Marshall McLuhan's name? Well, just the last name, McLuhan. I goes, no. He says it's L.A. Munch. So we had a Los Angeles munch here today. We munched down on McLuhan, L.A. Munch. But then I put it into the anagram machine and I found another one, AM lunch. Like we're getting up and going to school. AM. Anticipatory mindfulness, lunch. And then my favorite one is clan hum. If you take McLuhan's last name, you turn it in. We're a clan and we're just humming. His favorite joke was, why does a bee hum? Because it doesn't know the words.